need to do something that I can actually earn a living and move forwards with life. And I had read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. I just discovered it, as we all had, right? And that book completely changed my life, Alan. I'm assuming you've read it, right? I was horrific at sciences, maths was very strong, and my English was strong, and I loved communication, I love languages and marketing. They always wished that I would get a normal job. That I would get a 9-to-5 job. I still remember it to this day. Is I walked to the front door of our house and the door opened and I just got down on the floor and kissed the carpet because it was carpet. And then I went to the toilet and I screamed and went, oh my God, the water's running, the water's running. And the toilet's flushing. And it was just so exciting. You know, one of my missions in life, or my main mission, shall we say, and I'm still working on how I'm going to do that, is to take every homeless child off the streets around the world and out of the sex trafficking industry. And you know what I love about this part of the world is that nobody is left out on the street. You know, and that is literal and also truth. So there is no such thing as homeless, by the way, here in Dubai. So one of them is nothing's impossible. Like nothing is impossible. And the second is to never ever give up. Never ever give up. And the third, which I truly believe is the most important of all, is to treat others as you would want them to treat you. I would say the most important thing that I've learned is that family is everything. So you know, they will protect their family no matter what. They know I'm in a place that I have freedom and not so many do. So I am definitely going to make the most of that because I don't know when that freedom will change. I chose to come to Dubai because I left Megève in the French Alps and I chose to come here, and it wasn't popular, it wasn't trendy, it wasn't the fastest growing city on the planet in those days, right? But it was where I felt aligned because I'd already lived next door in Oman for 6 years. I knew the region, the people, the cultures, and I felt comfortable. Plus it's, you know, tax-free and very, very safe. There's no crime here, like no guns, no drugs, no homeless, zero crime. Yeah, like I've seen such poverty that I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't, like in India, I was in a restaurant and all these kids came to the window and they were looking through the window and they were starving and I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to give them the food, and the restaurant manager said, madam, I know you want to give them the food, but if you go out there now, you will get swarmed. You know, people only look for the positive or the glamorous, and they believe that that's how they should live. They believe they're entitled, that I need the latest trainers because so-and-so's got the latest trainers. You know, there's kids that don't have water. They don't have clothes, as you know. It's sometimes I just have to stop myself because, you know, things I've done, I take very fast decisions. I don't analyze. And, you know, I think that's definitely helped me in many, many opportunist moments. It was like the key to a door that I didn't know existed, to a path I didn't know existed. I don't know anything about real estate. I don't want to appear ignorant. So I'm going to go and learn to be a real estate agent myself so that then I'll put myself in the position when a really good deal comes in front of my eyes. So that's what I did.
Today we have the opportunity of exploring real estate across the globe with Lucy Parker. Lucy has this really amazing niche that if you've ever been curious about what it would be like to live in somewhere like Dubai and how is it possible to invest or purchase real estate in a place like that, then you're going to love today's episode because that is Lucy's niche. She has carved out this amazing market in Dubai, working with some of the world's wealthiest families and individuals. And I am so excited to spend some time with Lucy Parker today.
Thank you, Alan. I'm really, really excited to be here for all your listeners as well. And to open up the world of the other side of the world that people are not so familiar with here in Dubai.
I am really excited to hear about that. And I want to bring the listeners in on the conversation that we started having before we hit record about what the journey or the pathway to success looks like. If somebody goes to your YouTube channel or finds you on LinkedIn, what they're going to see is what appears to be this fabulously successful person. Their life is in order. They're traveling all over the country, all over the world. But that isn't true for most of our entrepreneurial journey. In fact, something that I shared with you was that for my family, I've told them that we're a 20-year overnight success story. So I'd love to hear the Lucy Parker 20-year overnight success story. What have been the ups and downs, the highs and the lows? And we'll start there.
Sure. Gosh, I will try to make this as short as possible because I have definitely quite a large life story. But I mean, look, I was brought up overseas, so travel is in my blood. I am from England. And as you said, I live in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates here in the Gulf. So when I was, thinking what to do at university, I didn't know what to do. I didn't, school, I was your average pupil at school. I loved more about being around friends and socializing. I was horrific at sciences. Maths was very strong, and my English was strong. And I loved communication. I loved languages and marketing. So I said to myself, okay, at uni, because I don't know what to do, I'm just going to study languages because that will get me to communicate more easily with the world and be able to travel and meet different cultures and be on their level. So that's what I did, Alan. I learned French and Spanish, which I'm now fluent at both. And that took me all over the world on opportunities. So I've lived in the Caribbean, in Honduras, Roatan, where I was a voluntary school teacher for a year. I lived in Costa Rica for a year, where I was managing all the British gap year volunteers on all the national parks. So my role was to communicate with the local park rangers who were Costa Rican who didn't speak English, and then my fellow British gap year studenters that just wanted to party. So I was kind of like, a supervisor and mediator, should we say. Did a lot of backpacking, got on the local buses with chickens, etc. So I've had a lot of experience of travel. And the reason I introduced that is because I still didn't really know what I wanted to do in life when I got older. I thought, okay, let's go and be a tour guide. So I was actually a tour guide for 5 years, and I took people on adventure travel all over the world. And literally, I could be 2 weeks in Argentina on a tour with a group of British tourists. And then suddenly I'd find myself in Kenya on a beach holiday. Then we'd be snowboarding in Canada. And then we'd be climbing frozen waterfalls in Slovenia, literally. And then China, 3 months. So I literally traveled the globe, taking tourists all over. But the thing is, it didn't pay well, right? So I got to travel the world. This is way before social media. This is way before mobile phones and the internet almost. I'm showing my age. So I was like, okay, I need to do something that I can actually earn a living and move forwards with life. And I had read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. I just discovered it, as we all had, right? And that book completely changed my life, Alan. I'm assuming you've read it, right?
I have read it, and Robert Kiyosaki lives nearby, and
Ah,
I've actually had a chance to converse with him a few times at different real estate meetups.
yeah,
And if there's a common thread in people, maybe of our age group, that
yeah.
have experienced some financial freedom, almost all of them have read that book.
Yeah. It's incredible, right? It was like the key to a door that I didn't know existed, to a path I didn't know existed. Because look, I'll be honest here, I've come from a nice background, but it's also a traditional background of the 80s. So my father worked in a job for 40 years, salaried. My mother was a stay-at-home mum. We had one home, which was obviously the mortgage was paid off, and that was it. There was no entrepreneurial of sorts in our house. There was no like buying, flipping, selling real estate. So I wasn't party to any of that. So I opened this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I'm like, whoa, okay, there's another way. And I'm very curious. So, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we want to know more. We want to know how. We ask questions, and, you're always learning. I'm hungry to learn. So I decided, well, my dream is to buy a property. I wanted to buy a property in France because I love France. And so I thought to myself, well, I don't know anything about real estate. I don't want to appear ignorant. So I'm going to go and learn to be a real estate agent myself so that then I'll put myself in the position when a really good deal comes in front of my eyes. So that's what I did. And again, we're talking way before social media, nothing, no, not even mobile phones. So on the internet, I think it just arrived. I found a real estate company in the south of France for a British couple. My job was to drive people around houses. So that's all I did. And I was salaried. I wasn't paid any commission. And I was ignorant. I was naive. So basically, I'm driving all these people around these beautiful old homes in the middle of rural southwest France. And then my bosses are making a lot of money because I'm selling the property and doing all the sales skills, which is still, I'm just, new to it all. So basically, after 9 months, I decided that, well, I could do more and earn more, and this wasn't for me. And I had led one last tour before I hung up my tour guiding days. And because I'd been doing it for 5 years, the company allowed me to choose anywhere in the world. And I, being the most curious, adventurous person you'll ever meet, decided I needed to go to the Gulf and the Middle East because I wanted to understand for myself, not the media, what is this region that, when I was growing up was always the Gulf War and this and that. I wanted to see it for myself because I don't trust media. So I led a tour in Oman. I had to find it on the map. And I fell in love in Oman, led the tour, and decided I was going to leave Europe and move to Oman. Found a real estate job with a British couple. And I just happened to be there at the right time, Alan. So in 2006, real estate was just opening up to expatriates. Those are the non-Omanis, non-locals from the Gulf. And I was in the right place at the right time with two British entrepreneurs. He was ex-Marines. She was ex-marketing guru and entrepreneur. And I learned discipline from him. His name was Mike, the ex-Marines gentleman. So I learned discipline and the power of data. Okay. So very, very fast, I was collecting data of any clients, anyone that was messaging or asking us about property. And I was taking people out, in 50 degrees Celsius temperatures on viewings to buildings that are being built, no air conditioning. And it was hard and earning a pittance. However, it was a new region and it's tax free. And I figured that if I just kept going, there would be a difference in my output. And sure enough, after doing about a year, I managed to scrape together enough money to buy my own property. That was my first in my life. And it was on a payment plan. So that means that, you buy it from a plan. We call it off plan. And you pay into it straight to the developer over 3 years whilst it's being built. And I could do that. And then I got handover and I moved in. So my life completely changed because the minute I bought, every one of my clients could easily tell that I meant what I said I did when I told them this was a really great opportunity and I'd bought. And yeah, business really changed the game for me. The Omani, VIP families, they love the British because, the British came into the Gulf in the 50s and helped them discover oil. So, in the Gulf, the British are very highly looked at, and especially in real estate, we're like the most trusted, shall I say, of, from anyone that does real estate for them. And so I had all of these Omani clients that just wanted to buy the mansions on the beachfront, and, business was great. However, there were tough months, Alan, and this is what I want to explain to people, that in between those, great deals, there were also months where I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I also am a photographer, and I used to print my work on canvas and then take it in the back of my car to a VIP Omani meeting that I was going to talk to them about buying a house, but I knew I wouldn't get paid for the house for 2 or 3 months. Whereas if I took the picture up with me to their office, and, basically show them photos, they all wanted to buy them then and there because, it's part of their personality that they're not going to say no to you. So
that's great.
so I would have, that petrol money or that food money for the next couple of weeks. And then they would ultimately also buy property. So that was a really, stepping stone for me. I found a bridge to help me pay my bills, and tie me over until, deals came through. And then slowly my name was known for the particular project I was selling amongst expatriates as well, because I lived there and I owned there. And then I was asked to run the sales team with my company. And then 4 of us actually moved companies and we started the franchise of Better Homes, which, for anyone that knows, the Gulf region is a very famous franchise here. It's not outside of the Gulf. So we started it. So there was a couple of myself. They came to me one evening. We had dinner together and they said, right, you're going to run sales. she's going to run rentals and I'm going to be CEO, but we want you in for running the sales team. And I never look back in terms of being able to offer value and help others from that moment.
Lucy, there's so much for me to unpack there. So the first one will be, so there weren't a lot of entrepreneurs in my family either.
Yeah.
And I would love to know what, I don't know if you have siblings, but you talked about your parents, very traditional work life, especially for that generation.
Yeah.
What were they thinking as you traveled the world as this tour guide? What was how did they feel about that? And then
Yeah.
especially when you made the decision to move to the Middle East, for a lot of people, that initiates fear immediately. Because it's unknown, it's scary. So I'd love to know what other people around you were seeing or saying to you as you made that seemingly crazy decision to move to Oman and start this real estate business.
So I love your questions, Alan. And yeah, it's sometimes I just have to stop myself because, things I've done, I've just I take very fast decisions. I don't analyze. And, I think that's definitely helped me in many, many opportunist moments. So, yeah, for sure, my parents were a bit weary of the Middle East when I said I was going. But what I have to explain is, so we were brought up in the South Pacific as children until we were 8. So we lived in Vanuatu in Fiji. My dad was running the banks there. So already you can imagine my parents were pretty adventurous. So in the late 70s, they brought us to the South Pacific when it was like
Wow.
a 2.5-day flight over 4 cities. So already that's not normal, right? So my parents had that adventurous spirit. I wouldn't say entrepreneurial spirit, but adventurous. They were curious. And so, they didn't have a problem with me tour guiding at all because they've taken us all over the world as well. However, they always, always, always wished that I would get a normal job, that I would get a 9 to 5 job. And I'm sure you've been there too, Alan, right?
Absolutely. I think sometimes some of the harshest criticism or pushback that we get are from people that are closest to us, like our parents.
Yeah.
So I think that's fascinating that
Yeah.
you had some childhood experience where they understood what it meant to grow up or be
Yeah.
outside of, your normal place, outside of England.
Absolutely. What I will say is, one, there's so many things that I completely, am appreciative from both my parents, but one of them is they have always believed in me. And I've got goosebumps actually when I say this to you. They've always believed in me. And, they've always said, well, you make the decision, because you know what's going to happen, if it doesn't work out. But they've also always said you can always come home. They were always there with open arms, with love and support. And I truly believed and said to myself, look, there's something else I haven't shared with you. When we were 10, my parents came back from the South Pacific, and then my father got posted to Denmark, so that my mum and my dad and my little brother went to Denmark. But me and my sister were 10 and 11, and they wanted us in a British school system. So they sent us to boarding school, which I was so excited about. I couldn't wait. My sister didn't want to go. I did. So we were already independent as 10 and 11-year-olds because we were flying unaccompanied from London to Denmark. And, so I always look back and think, we've had a great upbringing. I mean, we weren't short of anything for sure. And I saw my father work extremely hard. As in, I would see him when we lived in the UK, I would see him get up at 6 a.m., get a train for an hour to London, and then go to work and then come back an hour every single night. And so as a young child, you remember that. And I'm like, what? Wow, he did all that for us. And you only understand that when you get older. So I've always said to myself, that I want to show my parents that, we had such a nice upbringing and, good schooling. And I want to thank them, and I want to show them that it wasn't for nothing. So I've always had that. I want to pay them back, if you like. I've just always been like that. And actually, just completely fast forwarding to a couple of months ago because, you know, it's definitely something I've wanted to do for many years. I actually paid for my parents to fly business class, which really, it wasn't their first time in their life, but they've never paid themselves. Like they had like the bank pay them. But, you know, I did it out of my pocket, which for me was a massive thing. But that for them, you know, my father loves planes. He loves Emirates, and, you know, he wanted to always be upstairs in business class. So I did it. And, you know, they were in shock, but equally I said, you know, this is the least I can do to say thank you for everything I've had all my life from you. So I feel really blessed that I can do that and say thank you. And I wanted to do it quickly before it's too late because my parents are getting older. So
Yeah, we never know when, you know, it doesn't matter what the age is. You know, all of us, there's a time clock somewhere, and at
there
some
is a
point
time clock.
we run
Yeah.
out of minutes, right? And I'm
Yeah.
glad that you had that opportunity to do that for your dad.
Yeah.
Um, so another point of curiosity that stuck in my mind, I lived in Ecuador for a little while,
Oh, wow. Awesome.
um, and it wasn't a luxury living experience. I lived in some of the poorest neighborhoods in Ecuador. Um, the house that I lived in didn't have running water inside of it. We had an outhouse out back.
Yeah.
And so I experienced extreme poverty and what it's like for people living in that situation. Most people, their home was the size of the office that I'm standing in right now, and it was
Yeah.
made out of bamboo with newspapers to insulate from the wind or whatever cold there might be.
Yeah.
And so your experience being in Honduras and then now contrasting that with your living experience in Dubai, what were some of the lessons that you learned in Honduras that have been beneficial for you as you
Yeah.
navigate this completely different world, right? With the
Yeah.
ultra wealthy.
No, absolutely. Well, so it's interesting what you say about Ecuador because I had exactly that for a year when I went to the Caribbean. So when I was in Roatan, which is the Bay Islands of Honduras, and by the way, this was back 25 years, showing my age a bit now, nearly, yeah, 25 years. Um, so our house also had no running water. So we had a bucket of water that was from the rain outside, like a big, massive bucket, and it was full of flies. And that was our water for washing up, for showering, for the toilet, everything. Like we'd put buckets over us full of flies, me and this other girl, because we went out as volunteers. We were school teachers for a year. So we had electricity, but we didn't have AC. We only had fans. And also you could break into our hut because some friends that we were with for jokes used to break in with a credit card in the door. It was like one of those old wooden Caribbean huts on stilts. You know, I've just been in Belize a few weeks ago and I literally saw huts that were like my old house. And like you, the house was literally the size of a, you know, like someone's kitchen, if that.
Right.
So I lived like that for a year as well, Alan, like you. Um, and when I came back to England after that year, the first thing I did, and I still remember it to this day, is I walked to the front door of our house and the door opened and I just got down on the floor and kissed the carpet because it was carpet. And then I went to the toilet and I screamed and went, "Oh my God, the water's running. The water's running." And the toilet's flushing. And it was just so exciting. And from that moment, I have never, you know, when people brush their teeth and they leave the water and it really annoys me, I switch it off and I tell people, stop, you know, just running that water while you're busy with your teeth. You know, that could have fed like a family that's walked 15 miles for water that you
To get
just
the water.
wasted. So I absolutely appreciate the other side of the world and how little people have. And Alan, I actually, you know, one of my missions in life, or my main mission, shall we say, and I'm still working on how I'm going to do that, is to take every homeless child off the streets around the world and out of the sex trafficking industry. Because I have seen such poverty. I mean, in Central America, but in India, but in China, Asia, it is so Africa. It's acute. And most of us as tourists don't see any of that side. We go from one swanky hotel to another into an airport terminal. Yes, I also travel like that, but I also see the real side of the world. And so I actually go to an orphanage. I'll be going again in a few months' time to Uganda, where I'm supporting the orphanage and helping with some of the kids that I sponsor. but I want to do that with 14 orphanages around the world. I'll have to have a chat with you about Ecuador. Maybe we could do that.
I love that you brought that up. So, because of my love for Ecuador, after
Yeah.
living there, I've had all of my older kids have been with me to Ecuador. And my oldest daughter spent a summer living in Ecuador in an orphanage with kids
Oh,
that had severe mental and physical disabilities and were
right.
basically abandoned by their
Oh,
family, by society. And so she went out and lived in that orphanage, helped take care of those kids, and then also volunteered at 4 or 5 other orphanages
mm,
in Ecuador while she was there. And that the experience of working with kids who are vulnerable anyway, but then when it's, I think, one thing to be vulnerable in a developed country, it's a whole different thing when you're in an undeveloped country or a third world country, because the reality is that everyone is struggling for survival,
yeah.
and um, oftentimes those kids are left on their own. And I'll share this with you. One of the most impactful results of one of my trips to Ecuador, my oldest son, who at the time was 16, we got home, and for several weeks, he was doing extra chores. He was not only doing his laundry, but somebody else's. He was volunteering and helping in the kitchen more. And because I was working, I didn't see that as much, but my wife mentioned that to me. And so when I had a moment, I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, buddy, like, mom has told me you're doing this, and that is awesome. Thank you. I just want to know why. What is motivating that?"
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, he said, "Dad, I was just in a place where I was watching 6-year-olds sell gum and water on the bus to help their family, and I just realized I wasn't doing enough." And I
Oh,
think everyone should have an experience of volunteering in an orphanage or any kind of experience like that outside of your own population, your own framework, and go and see how other people live and
yeah.
serve those people. And it will completely change the way that you see the world. And maybe that's been your experience as well.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I've got tears in my eyes because I love that your son saw that. And yeah, like I've seen such poverty that I didn't know what to do. And I couldn't, like in India, I was in a restaurant and all these kids came to the window and they were looking through the window and they were starving and I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to give them the food. And the restaurant manager said, "Madam, I know you want to give them the food, but if you go out there now, you will get swarmed. Like you'll get knocked over and they'll be fighting and it will get violent." And and I'm like, "But they're children. They're just hungry." And he said, it was really hard, Alan. But yeah, like I agree that children, especially children, should see how others live their lives because our children today are so entitled, so spoiled, so lazy. Generally, I'm generalizing, not everyone's
Sure.
children, because they just don't know any other way. And then social media is really, you know, not aided the fact that people only look for the positive or the glamorous and they believe that that's how they should live. They believe they're entitled, that I need the latest trainers because so and so's got the latest trainers. There's kids that don't have water, they don't have clothes, as
Yeah.
you know. So, by the way, just whilst we're on air here, like this orphanage that I go to, I'm actually taking volunteers this year and I still have places, by the way. So, for
Oh,
anyone
fantastic.
listening, and I didn't even think about that when I was coming on this podcast. So, if there's anyone listening here that would like to potentially come and help and contribute, Alan, I'm sure you'll put my details somewhere for them to contact me. But, it's a non-profit. It's 2 American missionaries who I met through my Keller Williams network in the US, and they are fabulous girls. I think they're 30-year-olds each of them. One of them's adopted 1 child, another's adopted 2. They have completely built from scratch on a plot of land an orphanage. It was just handed over like literally 6 months ago. And they started with, 2 or 3 orphans, and they're now at 70. And I think the newest child came to them literally 2 days ago because I've been watching them on social media. And I mean, this child is probably 3-4 weeks old. And in Uganda, in Africa, it is such a sorry state, but there's a lot of child rape, and also, very young mothers of 13, 14. They don't even understand childbirth. They don't understand about children. So, you get calls. I remember one story, and, it might seem so sad to tell this, but it's life. So people need to hear this. They got a call, and there was this 3-hour newborn baby that had been chucked down the latrine because someone was trying to get rid of it because they didn't know what to do with it. They couldn't cope. Apparently, it was a 13-year-old mother. It still had its umbilical cord, and thankfully, it was saved. And thankfully, it's with the girls in the orphanage, and it's like it's a little boy of just one. But
Wow.
stories, it's horrifying. It's horrifying.
So I would love to know. It's easy to be busy when you're successful,
Yeah.
and you could very easily spend all of your time in Dubai with wealthy clients, with enjoying the luxuries that the world has to offer, and yet you're choosing to spend time intentionally with these children in Uganda. I have found, at least in my life, that what really drives the passionate purposes that I have usually is rooted in some sort of pain that I've experienced. So I would love to know what is the root of that desire for you? Was there something painful that you experienced where now you want to solve that pain for other people? And I haven't read anything about this on your profile or anything else. I have no idea
Yeah.
where that's going to go, but I would love to
Yeah.
know if there was a pain inside you that now you're trying to solve in others because of that, your own personal experience.
Okay, so when we lived, there is to a certain extent. So when we lived in the South Pacific, I must have been 3. It's one of my earliest memories. My mum used to go and volunteer at the local orphanage. And I always remember as a little girl thinking, wow, my mum is going to be somebody else's mummy. And I wanted to go with her. And I can't remember if my feeling was I was jealous or I had FOMO. I was feeling left out because she wouldn't take me to see the other kids. So I can't remember my feeling at the time. But she wouldn't take us. And I really wanted to go and meet the children and see what mummy was doing with these other children. And so I always have that in the back of my mind that I wanted to do and help and give back to the orphanages. And then, more, I think a couple of years later, my mum was keen and my father. So we're 3 children. And my mum, to a certain extent, said to my father, can we adopt a child and take it back to England when we go from the South Pacific? And they decided as a together in those days, for whatever reason, and we're talking back in the early 1980s, that it wouldn't work in white leafy suburb London, England, because the child would be subject to a lot of racism. And in those days it wasn't multicultural like England is today. Now, is that the right decision? We'll never know, because I look at it as, the decision to just help a child and give them an opportunity is greater than anything that they may or may not experience in bullying and racism. But, that's my opinion only. And that's not my parents' opinion. And, they made that decision. So maybe as a child, I remember thinking, well, maybe one day I would like to help those children, because we couldn't help them at that time as a family. And then also, my mother's, been such an amazing mother and helped us and, brought us up and stuff. But I think she would have wanted to go and work more with orphanages, but she never did. And so I'm kind of maybe living a little bit of her regret, if you like, because she's never gone to do it. And then, she's not been a working woman and she's lost a lot of her confidence and, won't go anywhere without my father as such. So, maybe there's a bit of that in me that's like, well, I don't want to have regrets. And I've tried my hardest, and I nearly got her to come with me last year to Uganda, and I'm going to try again this year. It would be very last minute if I did. So you never know. So that's part of it, Alan. And then I think the other part is, I have not been able to have children myself just because I have never been with the right person. Nothing else. That's the only reason. And I love children dearly. I always have. I've always wanted my own babies and kids. And I just, I was never had that opportunity. And so maybe it's my way of, or destiny's way of putting me there to help children in my way, and give back. But who knows, and who knows what the future brings, if I'll have my own children, if I'll adopt, I don't know. But what I do know is that, those children are the ones that are so innocent and they don't know how to help themselves. And I know that if I were one of them looking at one of us, shall I say, rich tourists, walking down the street, I would want to know that they weren't going home and forgetting me. I'd want to know that they were going to do something to help me because they could. So I only do what I always imagine others would do for me.
That's incredible. Um, so you said something there that just sparked a thought, and maybe this is just a point of recognition. I think sometimes we look at life experiences that we have, and it's easy to wonder, well, why not me, or how come this?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned is oftentimes that's just really short-sighted. And if we just wait a little bit, we'll understand why we've had that experience. Because in my personal experience, the hardest things that have happened have also been the things that have led to some of the greatest joys that I've had.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of people, it can be very painful wanting kids and not having kids.
Yeah.
Um, we have 8 children, so we're on the opposite spectrum
Amazing.
from you, Lucy,
I
where
love it.
I've got a house full of kids.
Aw.
The flip side of that is because I have those responsibilities, I don't have the freedom to be able to say, hey, I want to go to Uganda and spend whatever amount of time and help these
Yeah.
orphans. And I think it's really beautiful that in something that could be perceived as a lack or something painful, that you've created something really beautiful out of that.
Mm.
That might not have been an opportunity under a different circumstance, but because of your personal circumstance, there's been a way, whether you believe that's God or the universe or whatever it is, that has provided you a place to have joy with kids and also doing something that could completely change the life of a child.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I mean, I truly believe that. I look back and, one of the things people comment, because I do a lot on social media, is people always comment that they can't keep up with where I am, where I'm traveling, what I'm doing. But essentially, it's really what you said, that I know I'm in a place that I have freedom and not so many do. So I am definitely going to make the most of that because I don't know when that freedom will change. You know, at any point, family could change, where I live could change. Suddenly I have children. And, I don't ever want to regret a day of my life. And I don't regret a day of my life. If I look back on my journey and, I've now been in real estate nearly 20 years, I've had tough years, really tough years. But those tough years have brought me to where I am today. And we were talking about this, weren't we, just before we started this call, that it's not been overnight where my business has come to today. I've had months where, well, firstly, I told you in Oman, and those were tough. But I also was with somebody, a local Muslim. He was my fiance, Muslim Omani gentleman. We were together 6 years. So I always had somebody there. But here in Dubai, I've never had anyone as backup. And, in 2014, Alan, the market changed here, the real estate market changed. And there were no sales happening because the sellers wanted to sell at 30% more. The buyers weren't going to meet their price. Probably a bit like, what's happening for the rest of the world right now. And there was a stalemate and nothing was transacting. And so I found myself in a position where I had to leave where I was living in a really nice rented apartment on the Palm. I had to pack all my bags and clothes and put them into, live in a studio, which was like the size of a box room, and eat humble pie for 2 years. So I was out with very wealthy clients, driving them around mega mansions, and then I was going home to the studio where I couldn't even walk from my bed to the sink. That was tough, right? And the thing is, I've lived in that before in Honduras, in the Caribbean. So I could wake up every day and say, Lucy, you're in a much better situation than you were in the Caribbean when you didn't have running water, and you've now got AC, and it's all clean and it's safe, and there's no one outside that wants to steal things. So, I always look at the bright side. I'm the most positive person you could think. But Alan, here's the thing, and I think this is really important for your listeners, is I was fed up with being broke. I got to a point where I was fed up. And I sat there and I said to myself, Lucy, if you don't change, then you're going to be chucked out of the country, because in this part of the world, we're not locals. We're not entitled. There's no social security. No one's going to, there's no, family to run to. You're on your own. And so it was either I have to go back to, backwards in life, go back to my parents in England. No way, where I have no network, no experience, never done real estate in England, or I had to do something different. Literally, I had to change. And so what I did was I started going live on Facebook as videos. That's what I did. And I had no money, so I had to do something that was free. So I was like, okay, what are you good at? Well, I can present on video. I know that works. And I started doing videos of local areas on the Palm by walking around. And, it wasn't high tech, but equally I was ahead of the crowd, ahead of my competition, because nobody yet was doing video in 2014, 2015. That was early. Now every real estate agent is doing video on day one, hour one, but they weren't then. And people actually know my name and say, Lucy, you were one of the first realtors doing video, weren't you, in Dubai? They remember me. And so very quickly, what happened with that, Alan, is opportunity came to me. Firstly, I had two owners on the Palm that had seen my videos and said, can you come and represent our properties? So I straight away had property for sale with motivated sellers that wanted me. And then from that, I also had Keller Williams come knocking on my door, which is where my whole world changed, because, I wouldn't be here today with you, and I wouldn't have any of my network in the US or any of my experience with personal development or anything if I hadn't had the Keller Williams door open to me. And so that was all in 2015. And, at that point, they offered me the team leader role. So to come in, open up Keller Williams with the OP and be team leader, which for those listening is your role is no longer selling. So you are now interviewing and recruiting top talent as realtors, and then you're training them to success. So I just changed direction for a couple of years, and that's what I did. And, unbeknown to me, I said yes. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I said yes and did it anyway. That's how I come across GoBundance and David Osborne, because he had a leadership cocktail party in Austin on my very first day in Keller Williams, because his mother discovered South Africa, and our owner of Dubai, Keller Williams, is from South Africa. So that's the connection. So I came to his cocktail party, and that's how my eyes first opened to GoBundance and everything in the tribe. But that's a whole nother story.
Again, there's a lot of layers there. I would love to know, when you started doing the videos,
Yeah.
did you feel like you were succeeding, or did you?
No, I felt like people were laughing. I felt like people were thinking, in fact, do you remember? I think I remember one of the first videos I ever did was in Ramadan. So I put my abaya on, my black abaya, not covering my head. And you don't have to do it, by the way, but I just put it on because I thought, well, if I do a video in Ramadan, let me do it out of respect and have the abaya on. And I did a video about what is Ramadan. Yeah. And people loved it. And then they wanted to listen to it because they loved it because it was from the point of view of a Westerner. And then I started doing, just random videos about like places to eat on the Palm, where's good to hang out. So yeah, but no, it wasn't a success to start with, but obviously people were starting to see my video. And Alan, as well as I do, on Facebook, you cannot see everyone that's viewed your video, right? If it goes public.
Right.
So I never knew who was watching me. I never knew.
So we've talked about what you've learned from living in some of the extreme poverty.
Yeah.
I would love to flip that page over, and I would love to know some lessons that you've learned from working with some of the wealthiest families. And part of that is I believe there's a misconception about who these people are, what they believe in. One of the greatest privileges of my life is for years I worked with an organization that trained ambassadors and representatives to the UN on how to protect the family in their country. And that exposed me to meeting with people from Uganda, from Guyana, I worked with the ambassador from the Holy See one year.
Okay.
And what that did is it helped me to really connect with people all over the world
Yeah.
and open my eyes to how similar a lot of us were. And then as successes come, and I now have conversations with some very successful people, I'm always just astounded, not only at what they've accomplished in the same amount of lifespan that the rest of us have, but also at the charity and the good that's being done in the world. And so I would
Yeah.
love to see, hear, maybe some highlights of your experience working with the ultra wealthy, and what are some lessons that you've learned from their lives.
Okay. So working with the ultra wealthy. So I would say the most important thing that I've learned is that family is everything. So they will protect their family no matter what. And yeah, just, you know, I'm talking about the locals here in the Gulf. Um, and, whatever they do is a decision. They might make a decision on their own, but it will be for the good of their family and their family's enjoyment. And what I love about this part of the world is that nobody is left out on the street. And that is literal and also truth. So there is no such thing as homeless, by the way, here in Dubai, because in Islam, you've got the 5 pillars of Islam, and one of them is shelter and protect thy neighbor. And that neighbor means your family, your friends. So I have never seen this type of culture in Europe, right? There's so many people, and anywhere else in the world, in the Western world, US as well. I mean, I know the homeless situation is really bad as well. But here in this part of the world, you do not see homeless people because it will never get to that. Somebody will shelter someone else's family member. That is part of Islam. So I love that about this region. And bearing in mind, I have traveled all over the world. I've lived on 4 continents, but I've lived here the longest. So that is testament to the fact of why would a Western woman live here when I could live anywhere on the planet? And I have had the opportunity and I could, because there is nowhere like it, with such respect, um, looking out for each other, love, kindness. I love it. Going back to your question about, experiencing with the ultra high net worth, of course it's time. Everything's about time. So, when I'm meeting my clients, I'm always on time anyway, but I know what we're going to talk about, and I'm very aware of their time. And you know, time you can never get back, and the ultra wealthy are usually ultra wealthy because of time, and they know how to manage their minutes, right, as we all know. So that's definitely been a learning curve for me, and I've got a lot better at my time management. And then thirdly, which is perhaps the most important of all, is honesty and truth. Is say what is the truth. You're both sat in a room, and they know that they're really wealthy, right? Okay, so there's no beating around the bush, yet they still are asking you for advice. So when I lived in Oman, I was actually invited to sit at the table with the royals. I think it was like twice or 3 times, to talk about the state of the real estate market, because I knew what
Wow.
was going on more than they did, because I was on the street every day. So it wasn't with the Sultan himself. He was pretty, what should we say, unreachable, but with his immediate family and, the next in line. And yeah, like I would never have that opportunity in England. Can you imagine sitting around the table with Prince William and Prince Charles? So, but they through contacts and network, they wanted to hear my opinion, my voice, what was happening in the market in their country. But they are just normal people, right? And I'll say they because obviously I'm nowhere near being ultra high net worth. But we're talking wealth where everybody has private jets, everybody has sort of 5 to 10 domestic workers. They travel to Europe, 2 months, 3 months a year to their house in London, and then their other house in Geneva in Switzerland. So you asked me about my other experience with the ultra high net worth. So I didn't add this in, but within my nearly 20-year career in real estate, I had a stint between Oman and Dubai when I decided I wanted to go back to France. And so I chose on purpose the most sought after ski resort stroke village where the Gulf residents would buy real estate, but also the ultra wealthy. And it's called Megève. I don't know if you've heard of Megève. Um, and
I haven't.
I'll give you a very interesting insight into Megève. So it's 45 minutes from Geneva up in the Alps, and it is apparently the highest point that you can go and ski and still wear a pacemaker. Isn't that
Okay.
interesting, right?
That's good to
So,
know.
yeah, as a result, the King of Saudi had a royal residence there because he also had a pacemaker. He's no longer with us. So, when the King of Saudi goes somewhere and sets up home as his holiday home, then a lot of the other royals follow. And then a lot of other royals also are next door in Courchevel skiing. So, it's made it a very, very expensive, niche little village in the Alps, very pretty, not cheap. And I chose to go and work for Sotheby's selling real estate to the ultra high net worth. And literally, I was dealing with the Gulf Arabs, Italians, the French, the Brits, the Swiss, you name it. They were, it was a myriad of clientele. And so, yeah, I mean, they were my clients day in, day out. They were arriving by helicopter into their chalets. Yeah, I mean, no request was too big. We would always help them out, even if they were coming to rent a chalet for a month. So I've definitely seen both extremes. Let's put it like that. Haven't been on a private jet yet, but I'm working on that the next couple of months.
Fantastic. So did you ever in those meetings or in that time period feel like you didn't belong? Because I
Oh
think
yeah,
sometimes you get into a room like that and all of a sudden imposter syndrome like crazy shows up, or it's
yeah,
very difficult sometimes to recognize our own worth and value when what we're looking at, we seem like, again, looking at somebody else that has that sort of wealth, you I think we paint the picture that everything else in their life is also put together and we're much less than. So have you felt that way, and how do you combat that, or is it something that you still wrestle with?
yeah. Actually, I had it last week. But yes, no, very much so. I do have imposter syndrome, but at the same time, I push myself into those on purpose because I say to myself, Lucy, you are no different to any other human on this planet. You have value to offer. I have a self-talk, right? You have value to offer. You have experience to offer. You have knowledge to offer, and they've invited you into this room because they value you. So, and I just tell myself that, and then I'm always me. There's no point being anyone else. I say it as it is. I'm very direct. And I guess a lot of people like that, and if they don't like that, well, we soon find out. But it's generally never got me into trouble yet, touch wood.
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 or 10 years? What as you envision your best
Well,
life? You've lived all over the world, you've traveled all over the world. You haven't been on a private jet, so that's got to be on the 5-year vision somewhere.
it's on the
Um,
6th month. It's going to be within 12 months, so just watch it. Yeah.
I'll be watching for that for sure. Yeah, there is no other experience quite like personal private aviation.
I bet.
And I feel super spoiled to be able to enjoy that on a regular basis. Not in a
Well,
jet yet.
yeah. So, Alan, I know I would love to know more about your experience with aviation. What is it you're doing with aviation?
Well, I'm having a lot of fun is the first thing. And so, where again the principle of your pain leads to your passion. Um, you and I haven't had this conversation, but it is how we connected, and you heard my story, or at least part of my story.
Yeah.
I lost 3 parents in 2 years, starting with my mother-in-law in 2018, my father-in-law in 2019, and my dad in 2020.
Mm,
And I was completely unprepared emotionally or psychologically for what that sort of loss would do to me.
yeah.
And at the time, I was enjoying what I thought was a successful, meaningful life. I had built a business that was doing $16 million a year in revenue, uh, owned properties, we could travel. And all of a sudden, none of that had any value whatsoever, because I had no idea how to overcome grief, and it swamped me. And I here in the ultimate like switch of fate or whatever, I think at that point, I was in my 40s, young 40s, 43, and I had achieved everything that I'd ever put on my bucket list to that point. And then after these losses, I was just struggling to function. And nearly every day looked the same. I would get in my truck, I would drive to work. I could stand about an hour or two of being there before I was just feeling overwhelmed. I would get back in the truck and I would drive to some lonely place, usually a national park.
Yeah.
And I would crawl in the back seat of the truck and I would sleep for most of the rest of the day. And I recognized pretty quickly that something had to change, because the trajectory of my life at that point was not headed in a good direction. And I don't think that I ever wanted to end my life, but I certainly didn't want to live my life. And I could understand how someone could take their own life, because I feel like that was the next step down. And so I made the decision to walk away. I walked away from the business, and there was regret for that later. I couldn't even see value in my own life, so it's impossible, I think, to value anything else if that's the state that you're living in.
Yeah.
But I was literally seeking. I have written down on a note card that all I wanted out of life at that point was to feel happy,
Yeah.
to feel prosperous, and to feel like my life had some sort of meaning or purpose.
Right.
And as I prayed about that, I felt inspired. I felt called, I guess, to try a flight lesson. And I've always wanted to fly since I was a kid. I just had never allowed myself to have that experience. And flying changed my life. All of a sudden, all the problems stayed on the ground, and there was a different creature that was born up in the air, probably imagining himself as Tom Cruise in a fighter plane or something with Top Gun playing in the background. But it shifted my world so much that the next question for me was, if this has done such wonderful things for me, how can this benefit other people?
Yeah.
And that's when I discovered Angel Flight West. And now I lead Angel Flight West in Arizona, and we're 200 volunteer pilots in Arizona who use our own private aircraft, whatever that is. Some guys have jets and other guys don't. But we fly people who need medical care far from home for free. So
just love that. I love what you do. It's just amazing.
So that's how aviation has changed my life.
Yeah.
And continues to do so. It's and it's also become, like you talked about, being able to identify your worth, your value, your experience.
Yeah.
Well, now for me, that has become an identifying feature that allows me to stand out in a crowd. Because even when I get in a room where there might be 100 other millionaires in this room, and they all have amazing talents and abilities, and they're doing amazing things, I'm almost always the only pilot.
Yeah.
And so then it's a very simple thing to say, hey, Lucy, have you ever been in an airplane over the Grand Canyon? Would you like to have that experience? And now I can give a gift that hardly anyone else can. And I think that's the real key to success, is what is the gift that you can give that nobody else can? And that's your unique ability, passion, purpose that you can bring to the world.
Oh my gosh. You know what I would love? I would love for you to fly some of the little kiddies at the orphanage, because they've never been on a plane in their lives. Can you imagine? They look at planes and they run, because all these kids in Africa, like, they have no idea. They've never flown. They've never left their town. I remember we took them on a boat on the lake, on the Nile, like Lake Victoria, which is the source of the Nile in Uganda. And on a boat, they were in awe. Just a boat. Can you imagine on a plane? But
I don't have to imagine it, because I've had that experience with, I've flown with kids as young as 10 months old who are getting a liver transplant, for example. Or every summer, Angel Flight West does summer camps for kids who have life-ending or life-altering conditions. And our pilots fly them to these camps. We fundraise to pay for the camps. And most of the kids have never been in an airplane. And
Oh,
so not
wow.
only are you connecting them with other kids who are having a similar life experience where they can really bond and make good friends who understand what they're going through, but now you're giving them a bucket list experience. And
Oh,
those are some of the most enjoyable flights. And I get to give that gift really anytime I get to have someone in a plane who's never
yeah.
thought they would be able to have that experience. And that's one of the greatest joys for me of being a pilot is I get to share something with someone that, and could be changing their life or saving their life in the case of Angel Flight West. But I don't think that's any different than the gift that you give of being able to help people find a property in Dubai, because I would have no clue how to do that. And so being able to how to connect with someone who has experience, who has the connections is a real gift that you've developed.
Yeah,
Um,
it's different, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I chose to come to Dubai because I left Megève in the French Alps, and I chose to come here. And it wasn't popular, it wasn't trendy, it wasn't the fastest growing city on the planet in those days, right? But it was where I felt aligned because I'd already lived next door in Oman for 6 years. I knew the region, the people, the cultures, and I felt comfortable. Plus, it's tax free and very, very safe. There's no crime here, like no guns, no drugs, no homeless, zero crime. Which most people, even when I say that, you can't comprehend that till you get here. And then you get here and you're like, she's so serious. I can walk out now in the park as a single woman with no one next to me, and I feel completely safe. And it's dark out there now. You wouldn't do that anywhere in the world. You wouldn't do that in England. You wouldn't do that in America. You wouldn't do that anywhere. So, yeah, so came here and obviously had entered the real estate world previous in France and in Oman. And it just it's the city that draws people to move here. Okay. Now, in those early years, people weren't moving here. People were investing. So they were buying an apartment and then renting it out. But basically what happened was, so I explained the first time, life was tough, and then I came into the Keller Williams realm. But the second time that time was tough, which we've all been through, all of us, was COVID, right? So
right.
COVID shut down the world and all of us were stuck wherever we were. And I happened to be in England and I got stuck in England, but I was selling Dubai real estate. How does that work? Well, I'll tell you how. Because I'd been doing video on YouTube, I could still sell even if I wasn't sat in Dubai, because my YouTube channel was doing the selling for me. And that's when it opened my eyes to the power of video, the power of YouTube, the power of online. Um, and the minute I could leave the UK and get back to Dubai, and it was a good nearly 3/4 of the year. I came back, even though I'd had a tough year and not made a lot of money. I came back, and this city was actually the first city to open up in the world. We were open after 6 weeks, which I think is the earliest anywhere. And they'd had a lot of media about spraying the streets here, so psychologically people see that and they go, "Oh, that looks good. It's clean." Don't get me started on the COVID conversation. We're not going there. But anyway, I'm just showing it as it was seen from the outside, as it was perceived. And also, although it wasn't advertised, you could be here with no vaccine, right? So it wasn't a case of you can't fly in. Everyone was welcome and accepted. It just wasn't out there in the media that we're allowing you to come if you don't have a vaccine, but you were welcomed. So then essentially people realized this pretty quick and everyone started traveling here and it opened up. And then because everyone was so fed up, and predominantly our clients are European. So I speak about Europeans because they are our number one client. We don't have so many North Americans yet, although it's changing. So, Europeans would be like, well, I'm stuck in my country. Like France was really bad. Austria and Germany, they were completely stuck indoors. And they were like, I'm finished. I'm done being in Europe stuck. I'm just going to move to Dubai. And what started as maybe someone coming for 3 to 6 months because they just wanted to leave their own country. It turned into them falling in love with being here and buying and settling. So, Alan, essentially, in the last 3 years, the clientele of buyers coming into Dubai are all non-resident. They are able to work from their laptops anywhere in the world. And imagine in COVID, we're sat on our laptops. Maybe it's raining outside, or it's horrid weather, or it's freezing cold, snowing. You're paying tax, and you could do all of that in another country where it's nice and warm. You don't have to pay tax and get the same outcome. Wouldn't you be on the next plane? Most people, that's what they did, and that's what they're doing. And quite frankly, the city has, it is gone absolutely wild in the last 3 years in terms of numbers. Wild as in, I don't mean wild, I mean as it's really, really grown in popularity. And 70% of our clientele buying they're settling here. They're not speculating. They're not flipping. They're not investors. They are buying to move in, which gives it a lot of confidence. And, it's very comforting that, it's not a market that's about to crash anytime soon, especially in terms of homes, because we just simply didn't build enough homes here. We built way too many apartments. So I do not advise anyone to buy apartments. I haven't been selling apartments for a year and a half, because you're not going to flip it and you're not going to make money until it's ready in 3 years plus. And, most investors want to come in and exit fast. So I don't advise apartments, but what I do advise are townhouses and villas, anything with a garden. And I'm a classic example. So I bought a house here a year ago on a payment plan, not ready. And the money that I paid has in 9 months, 100% brought me back return of equity. 100%.
That's awesome.
Equity. And it's not ready yet. So, by the time it's ready, it will have probably done 150%. So, prices just keep jumping, and there's no homes here. We don't have enough. So there is opportunity in Dubai, but you've obviously got to know what. Unfortunately, there's a lot of developers and promoters that are coming outside of Dubai, even to North America. I'm sure you've seen events around you and et cetera, but they're the developers that can't sell easily in Dubai because we all know that they're not great quality. So they need to go overseas with fancy marketing to bring you in. But, we know as the locals, what are the good projects, what are the good developers, and what are the ones to stay away from.
I love your enthusiasm for Dubai. It's infectious. I'll have to admit, before this call, I've never had any desire to travel to Dubai, but after our conversation, I'm like, I'm going to have to add that to the bucket list now.
Absolutely. You can do it en route. So you could do it en route to, like, a lot of people come here en route to the Maldives or to a safari in Africa, or maybe if you wanted like a dream holiday to India or Sri Lanka. It's a great, like, halfway point.
That's incredible. Lucy, before my dad passed away, he would always say, Alan, remember the little things. And so I would love to hear, as we wrap things up, what are some of the little things, maybe the daily habits or life lessons, things that you've learned that you would love to pass on, let's say to maybe one of those kids in Uganda or a kid anywhere who looks at the experience that you've had, the traveling that you've done, the real estate experience you've had, and thinks, how can I ever get there and do that? What little bits of advice would you give to someone like that?
Okay, so I've got 3 pieces of advice that I stand by. And they've come from my father, so I'm definitely a daddy's girl. So one of them is nothing's impossible. Like, nothing is impossible. And the second is to never ever give up. Never ever give up. And the third, which I truly believe is the most important of all, is to treat others as you would want them to treat you. And those are the 3 pieces of advice that I live by. And, I've been lucky to have experienced that through both my parents. And yeah, I would pass that on to everyone out there and just say that in this era with social media and digital media, and now AI fast coming forwards as well, it's never been easier for anyone to be successful. It's never been easier. And it's going to get even easier. I was at a conference last week with Peter Diamandis in LA. And, he said, we will see the first solo trillionaire teams ever, thanks to AI. You won't even need a team anymore. And he said the people that nobody knows about today will be the future millionaire, billionaires, and trillionaires of tomorrow, thanks to AI. So it's becoming a very even playing field out there. And, for those listening, this is the most opportunist moment in life, in history, to succeed.
I love that. And I'm going to leave that as a cliffhanger for our next conversation too, because I would love to get a download on how you see AI transforming the world and also real estate investing. And we just don't have time to include that in this episode. So we're going to schedule the next one and leave that as a cliffhanger. Lucy, it's been a gift to spend some time with you. Thank you for navigating time zones and jet lag to make this possible. You're amazing. And we'll make sure that we share your information with our guests so that if somebody's looking at traveling to Dubai or investing there, they know who to talk to.
Well, thank you. And God bless you, Alan. And, I'm on this podcast because it was listening to your story about what you do for others that truly moved me. So, thank you to you on behalf of all of those children and that need what you're doing. You're doing so much to impact this world. And that is ultimately why we're all here, right? So God bless you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And God bless you too.